Good morning, Minister. Good morning, team from the department. Could I just start by tabling UNRWA's latest situation report as of 10th February? I think the Secretariat has the reports, which really paints a picture of...
Sorry, it's been agreed by the committee. I assume that's been agreed.
Sorry, what was that?
She's tabling a report. It's a report we already have, but I'm happy for her to table. But I'm assuming you've agreed it.
No, I'll have a look at it first.
Okay,
As been
sure.
my past practice, I'll review it before we table. But we can distribute
first.
for information only.
I thought we had...
It's not mine.
But I want to have
It's
a
the
look.
Senators. I'm just asking.
Anyway, the report also reports on at least almost 28,000 Palestinians who have been killed by Israeli attacks. 70% of those killed are reported to be women and children, and another almost 68,000 Palestinians who are injured, as well as 156 UNRWA staff who have been killed as of 10th of February. Minister, on 27th January, you announced suspension of funding for UNRWA along with some other nations, effectively punishing 2 million people in Gaza by depriving them of critical support that UNRWA provides. This is really tantamount to the Australian government further inflicting collective punishment on Palestinians, and is in addition to the shielding and aiding of the State of Israel in its mission to annihilate Gaza and massacre tens of thousands of Palestinians. Minister, you have said that you spoke to UNRWA chief, Mr. Philippe Lazzarini, on the 7th of February, which is 11 days after you announced the suspension of the agency's funding based on allegations made by Israel. Minister, did you speak to Mr. Lazzarini before you announced the suspension of funding to UNRWA?
Well, first, I'm going to take issue with the very inflammatory language you've just used. And I want to place on record my deep concern at the way in which some in this debate, I include some members of the Coalition and some members of the Greens, are seeking to engage in what is a very difficult discussion in ways which are inflammatory, relying on often untruths.
Is it untrue that almost 30,000 Palestinians have been killed?
Excuse me, I listen to you politely.
We know the rules.
I listen to you with courtesy.
Please let the Minister finish.
I listen to you with courtesy. I'd ask you that you extend the same to me. The fact is that there is a humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. I have said that. And I've also said, as has the Prime Minister, we mourn every innocent life, Palestinian and Israeli, that has been lost. I think we all know that this is a conflict which is weighing heavily on people in Australia, people who take different views. One of the things that really struck me when I went to the Middle East is how important it is to maintain that we remember our common humanity in the midst of disagreement and conflict, and that we maintain respect for one another, because people come to this country because they want to live in a country that is peaceful, tolerant and respectful. And I would say that all of us who have the privilege of elected office have an obligation to ensure that the distress in our community does not turn to hatred. Now, Senator, the concern I have is that some of your and your colleagues' language appears to be designed, as is Peter Dutton's at times, to whip up
Minister, as you know, I have limited time. I have asked you a question. Could you respond to my question, please?
Senators, please.
I'm allowed
we know...
Chair, I have asked a question. I'll be
Senator
grateful
Faruqi.
if the Minister answers that question.
I won't be cutting you short, but just allow the Minister to finish and we'll get through what we need to get through.
I think it is of deep regret that whilst the government is seeking to ensure that distress in our community does not turn to hatred, we see particular members of Parliament who are looking to use this crisis to whip up anger presumably for votes.
Minister, don't you dare accuse me of whipping up anger and compare me to the people who actually whip up anger and are divisive.
Please,
Senator,
sorry, Minister.
Sorry.
Can we just please all cool the temperature a little bit, please?
I'm happy to.
Now, Senator, please allow the Minister just to conclude and we'll quickly come back to your questions.
I would say, Senator Faruqi, even in that question and in many questions you have asked, you persist in making
Telling the truth?
Inflammatory assertions which are not true.
Minister, did you speak to Mr. Lazzarini before you made an announcement to suspend funding? I'm sorry, that's my question. Could you please answer that question?
Well, you just have to wait for that question till the Minister just concludes her answer to your first question.
Thank you.
That is my first question.
Well, there was
and we'll come to it.
Senator Faruqi, you made a lot of loaded assertions and I'm entitled to respond to them, actually. And I would remind you that we have seen incidents in our community which included laying false corpses outside of MPs' offices, threatening emails and phone calls to staff in electorate offices, weaponising the imagery of deceased children, spraying fake blood on shop fronts of electorate offices. We have staff who are intimidated and threatened. And what I would say to you is your party has a responsibility, as all of us do, to not legitimise that by using inflammatory language and perpetuating untruths. Because that is what
telling the truth is not inflammatory language. No one is perpetuating untruths. Which untruths?
You are asserting that we have cut funding to UNRWA.
You have suspended funding to UNRWA. That is what I have asserted. No.
I have doubled funding to UNRWA. We have suspended, along with many other partners, in the face of serious allegations which UNRWA itself described as serious. Now, there are two truths in relation to UNRWA. The first is it is critical. It's a critical organisation which
I'm sorry, Minister. Please answer the question. It's like you've been talking about without answering the question for the last 10 minutes.
Okay. Minister, have you concluded your answer?
I'm trying to conclude my
No,
answer.
did you speak to Mr. Lazzarini before you announced the suspension of UNRWA funding? That's my question.
Is that your only question or you've got...
I've got a few more.
Okay, all right.
We have doubled UNRWA funding. A fact that, Senator Faruqi, in your accusations using loaded language, you never acknowledge. We have doubled core funding. The only funding that has been suspended, and I was very transparent about that, was funding for the flash appeal, and Ms Delaney has gone to that point. We have also increased humanitarian funding through other means to the region. There are 2 points about UNRWA. One is it is critical. The second is that serious allegations were made. And I made the decision, and I have been upfront as Minister in relation to that component of the funding, which is a fraction, let us be clear, of the funding that we are providing to UNRWA and to the region, that I, along with other colleagues, would pause pending consideration of how UNRWA would deal with those allegations. UNRWA has appropriately put in place an internal investigation, which Senator Green has asked about. There is also a UN investigation or a review inquiry, I can't recall the term, which Catherine Colonna, the former French minister, is heading. And we look forward to international partners, including Australia, being able to have the confidence to enable further funding to flow to an organisation which I do regard as critical for the well-being and welfare of Palestinians.
So, Minister, you're refusing to answer my question. I take it that's a no. You're refusing to answer my question and trying to divert attention by making false accusations about the Greens and I.
Well,
did you speak to Mr. Lazzarini before you suspended the funding to UNRWA?
No, I spoke to Mr. Lazzarini prior to the allegations becoming public when I was in Israel.
Before you suspended funding?
May I? I suspended the funding after the allegations were raised with me, and I, at that point, knew what Mr. Lazzarini's public response was. We then had sought a call, and I have spoken to him since, as I have with others about this issue.
Minister Wong, it has now been widely reported that the so-called 6-page dossier supplied by the State of Israel, which alleges that UNRWA staff involvement, contains no evidence of the claim. Minister, do you have the dossier? Have you seen it?
No, I do not, and I have asked Israel through my officials for the information on which they were relying when that story appeared in the international media. And I would hope that the Israeli government would ensure that its friends and partners were provided with that information.
So has that information been provided to you? Not yet. So you've made a decision on suspending UNRWA's funding without a single piece of evidence of the claims that Israel has made. We have just heard from Mr. Ennis Brown that there have been previous claims which have been exaggerated.
That's true.
Or based on all, and some of them have been false. Based on all of that, don't you think it is irresponsible for a government to suspend funding for a main UN agency? And you have yourself said that reports from the UN say that 400,000 Palestinians in Gaza are starving and 1 million are at a risk of starvation. Is it not irresponsible to just suspend funding without even talking to the chief of the agency, without having a shred of evidence? Is this how you make decisions? Without any evidence, without speaking to the people who are being impacted? That is highly irresponsible and reckless. And is this a pattern of how your decisions are made?
No. I don't agree with your multiple characterisations. I think two things.
But you have just said you didn't speak to Mr. Lazzarini.
Okay.
You have said you have no evidence from Israel.
Okay.
Can we speak with some courtesy?
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Can I have some courtesy? I extended you courtesy.
The Minister has the right to reply.
I think you're the one who are discourteous.
Senator, come on.
Senator, I listened to a very long question with a lot of false accusations.
All right.
Or erroneous
Minister,
accusations.
you have the call.
I would make a few points. Mr. Lazzarini sacked a number of his staff. He put out a statement which my recollection said serious allegations to be investigated, to be considered by UNRWA. So I would say to you, UNRWA itself demonstrated concern about the actions. Secondly, it would be nice at some point, Senator, if you could acknowledge that this Labor government has doubled funding to UNRWA. As yet, I have never heard you say that.
Minister, the $20 million that you say that you have funded, if you need my approval to do that, or my appreciation for you for doing that, sure, great. But $20 million was the funding that the government gave UNRWA in 2014, so 10 years ago, and you've brought it back just to that. So in real terms, the funding is still less than what it used to be 10 years ago. And basically at this point in time, when people are starving, when there is this genocide that Israel is committing against Palestinians, we need to give more funding, not suspend it, not bring it back to what it was 10 years ago.
Is there a question in there?
Well, I think there is.
Well, there was a question, but it's not being answered,
well,
really.
I'm not sure what the question was in that, but I'm happy to respond. The first is...
the question was, sorry, if you'd like me to repeat the question. You said you didn't know what the question was. I can repeat the question, Minister.
No, I don't need to repeat the question. I thought there was a new question, or a preamble into a question, but I'm sure the Minister's fully aware of what your original question.
I would like Australia to be in a position to have the confidence to provide additional funding, including through UNRWA, because I have no doubt that the humanitarian need is dire. And you have heard me, I think, in the Senate, in answer to questions from the coalition, saying that 400,000 people starving, 1 million on the brink of starvation, and 1.7 million sheltering in UNRWA facilities. So, this is why we have increased the core funding. This is why I announced the additional funding of the flash appeal, and this is why we have provided, I think, in excess of $40 million additional to the region, including through to UNICEF and the International Committee of the Red Cross. So, Senator, I hope that you would see that we are trying to help. But you asked the question about irresponsibility. I don't think a person in this position can reasonably say to the Australian people, I have been confronted with or informed of allegations of participation in a heinous terrorist attack, including by employees of an organisation, and simply continue to fund without gaining insurance. I don't think that is responsible. I wish that we were in a different position, and I hope that the international community can, through these processes, be given the confidence to continue to support UNRWA. That is my position. I know it is not the coalition's position, well, some, but that is my position and the government's position.
All right, do you have one last question? Yeah. Because I'm in need of a caffeine hit, and after that round,
Minister, sure.
Tea, okay?
Thanks, Chair.
Good.
Minister, I have carefully heard what you have said. From what I understand, you have no evidence of Israel's claims. You did not speak to the chief of UNRWA before you made the decision to suspend the funding. Surely there's a duty to actually verify the claims before taking such serious action, which actually puts hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people under further punishment and under further horrific circumstances. You have said, and the department staff have said, UNRWA acted swiftly and in accordance with its obligations. They suspended staff, they terminated staff that were named by Israel, even without proof, because from what I've read, they were fearful that if they didn't do that, exactly what you have done would happen. It has happened nonetheless. The investigation is going on, but it could take months. And given it's an active war zone, Minister, what else would it take to reinstate UNRWA funding, and how long will it take, given that UNRWA has said that by the end of February, if funding is not restored, there would be a collapse, not just in Gaza, but in the West Bank, Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon, where forcibly displaced people are taking refuge. What would it take to restore that funding, and why aren't you doing it right now?
Again, many questions. In terms of my duties, my duty first, I think, as a Minister of the Crown is to make a judgment about whether I can continue to fund an organisation when such serious allegations have been not only raised but also countenanced and action taken by the organisation itself. I need to be able, I'm a supporter of development assistance. I have argued long and hard for additional aid in the budget, and the government has provided additional development assistance in our budgets. If I am going to continue to do that, including to seek to provide further funding to UNRWA and others in the region, then I have to be able to say to this committee, to the Parliament, to the Australian people that I have confidence in the organisations and their processes that we are funding. That is my duty. Now, like you, I am worried. I would make the point to you, we have already provided our core funding for this financial year. I know other partners are considering their core funding for this financial year. The $6 million from Australia is not the critical amount. And many other partners suspended their funding for the same reason. I've spoken again to Mr Lazzarini. I've spoken to Sigrid Karg, the coordinator, special coordinator. I've spoken to other partners. I think there is a lot of action being taken to try and resolve this matter as quickly as is possible.
All right, thank you. Look, and on that note, we're going to break for morning tea.